audiobook part 2. You could listen to this in your car on the way to your shitty job. Probably. Reverend Mother Gaze Helen Moheim sat in a tapestried chair watching mother and son approach. Windows on each side of her overlooked the curving southern bend of the river and the green farmlands of the Atreides family holding. But the Reverend Mother ignored the view. She was feeling her age this morning more than a little petulant. She blamed it on space travel in association with that abominable space guild and its secretive ways. But here was a mission that required personal attention from Bene Gesserit with the sight. Even the Padishah Emperor's Truesayer couldn't evade that responsibility when the duty call came. Damn that Jessica, the Reverend Mother thought. If only she'd borne us a girl, as she was ordered to do. Jessica stopped 3 paces from the chair, dropped a small curtsy, a gentle flick of the left hand across the line of her skirt. That's what a curtsy is. Paul gave the short bow his dancing master has taught. The one used when in doubt of another station. The nuances of Paul's greeting were not lost on the Reverend Mother. She said, "He's a cautious one, Jessica." Jessica's hand went to Paul's shoulder, tightened there. For a heartbeat, fear pulsed through her palm. Then she had herself under control. "Thus he has been taught, your reverence." What does she fear? Paul wondered. The old woman studied Paul in one Gestalten flicker. Face oval like Jessica's, but strong bones. Hair, the Duke's black, but with brow line of the maternal grandfather that cannot be named, and that thin, disdainful nose. Shape of directly glaring green, staring green eyes, like the old Duke, the paternal grandfather who is dead. Now there was a man who appreciated the power of bravura, even in death, the Reverend Mother thought. Teaching is one thing, she said. The basic ingredient is another. We shall see. The old eyes darted a hard glance at Jessica. Leave us alone. I enjoy that you practice the meditation. Of peace. Jessica took her hand from Paul's shoulder. Your Reverence, Jessica, you know it must be done. Paul looked up at his mother, puzzled. Jessica straightened. Yes, of course. Paul looked back at the Reverend Mother. Politeness and his mother's obvious awe of the woman argued caution. Yet he felt an angry apprehension at the fear he sensed radiating from his mother. Paul, Jessica took a deep breath. This test you're about to receive, it's important to me. Test? He looked up at her. Remember that you're a Duke's son, Jessica said. She whirled and strode from the room in a dry swishing of her skirt. The door closed solidly behind her. Paul faced the old woman, holding anger in check. Does one diminish the Lady Jessica as though she were a serving wench? A smile flicked across the corners of the wicked old mouth. Wrinkled old mouth. Oh. The Lady Jessica was my serving wench, lad. For 14 years at school, she nodded. And a good one, too. Now you, come here. The command whipped out at him. Paul found himself obeying before he could think about it. Using the voice on me, he thought. He stopped at her gesture, standing beside her knees. See this? She asked. From the folds of her gown, she lifted a green metal cube about 15 centimeters on a side. She turned it, and Paul saw that one side was open, black, and oddly frightening, because Paul is racist. No light penetrated that open blackness. Put your right hand in the box, she said. Fear shot through Paul. He started to back away, but the old woman said, "Is this how you obey your mother?" He looked up at the bird-bright eyes. Slowly, feeling the compulsions and unable to inhibit them, Paul put his hand into the box. He felt first a sense of cold as the blackness closed around his hand, then slick metal against his fingers and a prickling as though his hand were asleep. The predatory look filled the woman's old features. She lifted her right hand away from the box and poised the hand close to the side of Paul's neck. He saw a glint of metal there and started to turn towards it. "Stop!" she snapped, using the voice again. He swung his attention back to her face. "I hold at your neck the Gom Jabbar," she said. "The Gom Jabbar, the high-handed enemy. It's a needle with a drop of poison on its tip. Ah, don't pull away, or you'll feel that poison." Paul tried to swallow in a dry throat. He could not take his attention from the seamed old face, the glistening eyes, the pale gums around silvery metal teeth that flashed as she spoke. "A duke's son must know about poison," she said. "It's the way of our times, eh? Musky, to be poisoned in your drink. Almost, to be poisoned in your food. The quick ones and the slow ones, and the ones in between. Here's a new one for you. The Gom Jabbar. It kills only animals." Pride overcame Paul's fear. "You dare suggest a duke's son is an animal?" he demanded. "Let us say I suggest you may be human," she said. "Steady! I warn you not to try jerking away. I am old, but my hands can drive this needle into your neck before you escape me." "Who are you?" he whispered. "How did you trick my mother into leaving me alone with you? Are you from the Harkonnens?" "The Harkonnens? Bless us, no. Now be silent." A dry finger touched his neck, and he stilled the involuntary urge to leap away. "Good," she said. "You passed the first test. Now here's the way of the rest of it. If you withdraw your hand from the box, you die. This is the only rule. Keep your hand in the box and live. Withdraw it and die." Paul took a deep breath to still his trembling. "If I call out, there'll be servants on you in seconds and you'll die." "Servants will not pass your mother, who stands guard outside that door. Depend on it. Your mother survived this test. Now it's your turn. Be honored. We seldom administer this to men, children." Curiosity reduced Paul's fear to a manageable level. He heard truth in the old woman's voice, no denying it. If his mother stood guard out there, if this were truly a test, and whatever it was, he knew himself caught in it, trapped by that hand at his neck, the Gom Jabbar. He recalled the response from the litany against fear, as his mother had taught him out of the Ben Gesserit rite. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. He felt calmness return. Said, "Get on with it, old woman." "Old woman," she snapped. "You've courage, and that can't be denied." "Well, we shall see, sirrah." She bent close, lowering her voice to almost a whisper. "You will feel pain in this hand within the box. Pain. But withdraw the hand, and I'll touch your neck with my Gom Jabbar. The death's so swift, it's like the fall of the headman's axe. Withdraw your hand, and the Gom Jabbar takes you. Understand?" "What's in the box?" "Pain." He felt increased tingling in his hand, pressed his lips tightly together. How could this be a test, he wondered. The tingling became an itch. The old woman said, "You've heard of animals chewing off a leg to escape a trap? There's an animal kind of trick. A human will remain in the trap, endure the pain, feigning death that he might kill the trapper and remove the threat to his kind." The itch became the faintest burning. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "To determine if you're human. Be silent." Paul clenched his left hand into a fist as the burning sensation increased in the other hand. It mounted slowly. Heat. Upon heat. Upon heat. Upon heat. He felt the fingernails of his free hand biting the palm. He tried to flex the fingers of the burning hand, but couldn't move them. "It burns," he whispered. "Silence!" Pain throbbed up his arm. Sweat stood out on his forehead. Every fiber cried out to withdraw the hand for the burning pit, but the Gom Jabbar. Without turning his head, he tried to move his eyes to see that terrible needle posed beside his neck. He sensed that his breathing was in gasps. Tried to slow his breaths, and couldn't. Pain! His world emptied of everything except the hand immersed in agony, the ancient face inches away, staring at him. His lips were so dry he had difficulty separating them. The burning! The burning! He thought he could feel scared curling black on that agonizing hand. The flesh crisping and dropping away until only charred bones remained. It stopped. As though a switch had been turned off, the pain stopped. Paul felt his right arm trembling. Felt sweat bathing his body. "Enough," the old woman muttered. "Call Wahad." "No woman, child, ever withstood that much. I must have wanted you to fail." She leaned back, withdrawing the Gom Jabbar from the side of his neck. "Take your hand from the box, young human, and look at it." He fought down an aching shiver. Stared at the lightless void where his hand seemed to remain of its own volition. Memory of pain inhibited every movement. Reason told him he would withdraw a blackened stump from the box. "Do it," she snapped. He jerked his head from the box, stared at it astonished. Not a mark. No sign of agony on the flesh. He held up the hand, turned it, flexed the fingers. pain by nerve induction, she said. Can't go around maiming potential humans. There are those who'd give a pretty for the secret of this box, though. She slipped it in the folds of her gown. But the pain, he said. Pain, she sniffed. A human can override any nerve in the body. Paul left his hand. Paul felt his left hand aching. Uncurled the clenched fingers, looked at 4 bloody marks where fingernails had bitten into the palm. He dropped the hand to his side, looked at the old woman. You did that to my mother once? Ever sift sand through a screen? She asked. The congenital slash of her question shocked his mind into a higher awareness. Sand through a screen. He nodded. The Bene Gesserit sift people to find the humans. He lifted his right hand, willing the memory of the pain. And that's all there is to it? Pain? I observed you in pain, lad. Pain's merely the axis of the test. Your mother's told you about the ways of observing. I see the signs of her teaching in you. Our test in crisis and observation. He heard the confirmation in her voice, said, It's truth. She stared at him. He senses truth. Could he be the one? Could he truly be the one? She extinguished the excitement, reminding herself. Hope, clouds, observation. You know when people believe what they say, she said. I know it. The harmonics of ability, confirmed by repeated tests, were in his voice. She heard them, said, Perhaps you are the Kwisatz Haderach. Sit down, little brother, here at my feet. I prefer to stand. Your mother sat at my feet once. I am not my mother. You hate us a little, eh? She looked towards the door, called out, Jessica! The door flew open, and Jessica stood there staring, hard-eyed into the room. Hardness melted from her as she saw Paul. She managed a faint smile. Jessica, have you ever stopped hating me? The old woman asked. I both love and hate you, Jessica said. The hate, that's from pains I must never forget. The love, that's just a basic fact, the old woman said, but her voice was gentle. You may come in now, but remain silent. Close that door and mind that no one interrupts us. Jessica stepped into the room, closed the door, and stood with her back to it. My son lives, she thought. My son lives and is human. I knew he was, but he lives. Now I can go on living. The door felt hard and real against her back. Everything in the room was immediate and pressed against her senses. My son lives. Paul looked at his mother. She told the truth. She wanted to get away alone and think this experience through, but knew he could not leave until he was dismissed. The old woman had gained a power over him. They speak truth. They spoke truth. Oh. His mother had undergone this test. There must be terrible purpose in it. The pain and fear had been terrible. He understood terrible purposes. They drove against all odds. They were their own necessity. Paul felt... I missed the spot. I just dropped the book. Paul felt that he had been infected with terrible purpose. He did not know yet what the terrible purpose was. "Someday, lad," the old woman said, "you too may have to stand outside a door like that. It takes a measure of doing." Paul looked down at the hand that had known pain, then up at the Reverend Mother. The sound of her voice had contained a difference than from any other voice in his experience. The words were outlined in brilliance. There was an edge to them. He felt that any question he might ask her would bring an answer that could lift him out of his flesh world into something greater. "Why do you test for humans?" he asked. "To set you free." "Free?" "Once, men turned their thinking over to machines in the hope that this would set them free, but that only permitted other men and machines to enslave them. 'Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a man's mind,'" Paul quoted. "Right out of the Butlerian Jihad and the Orange Catholic Bibles," he said. "But what the OC Bible should have said is, 'Thou shalt not make a machine to counterfeit a human mind.' Have you studied the Mentat in your service?" "I've studied with the Führer, Hawat." "The Great Revolt took away a crutch," she said. "It forced human minds to develop. Schools were started to train human talents." "B'nai Gesserit schools?" She nodded. "We have two chief survivors of the ancient schools, the B'nai Gesserit and the Spacing Guild. The Guild, so we think, emphasizes almost pure mathematics." "B'nai Gesserit performs another function." "Politics," he said. "Kol Wahad," the old woman said. She sent a hard glance at Jessica. "I've not told him, Your Reverence," Jessica said. The Reverend Mother returned her attention to Paul. "You did that on remarkably few clues," she said. "Politics indeed. The original B'nai Gesserit school was directed by those who saw the need of a thread of continuity in human affairs. They saw there could be no such continuity without separating human stock from animal stock for breeding purposes. The old woman's words abruptly lost their special sharpness for Paul. He felt an offense against what his mother called his instinct for rightness. It wasn't that Reverend Mother lied to him. She obviously believed what she said. There was something deeper, something tied to his terrible purpose. He said, "But my mother tells me many B'nai Gesserit of the schools don't know their ancestry." "The genetic lines are always in our record," she said. "Your mother knows that either she's a B'nai Gesserit descendant or her stock was acceptable in itself." "Then why couldn't she know who her parents were?" "Some do. Many don't. We might, for example, have wanted to breed her to a close relative to set up a dominance in some genetic trait. We have many reasons. And that's gross, because that's incest." Again, Paul felt the offense against rightness. He said, You take a lot on yourself." The Reverend Mother stared at him, wondering. Did I hear criticism in his voice? We carry a heavy burden, she said. Paul felt himself coming more and more out of the shock of the test. He leveled a measuring stare at her, said, "You say maybe I'm the Kuzak Haderach. What's that? A human Gom Jabbar?" "Paul," Jessica said, "you mustn't take that tone with—" "I'll handle this, Jessica," the woman said. "Now, lad, do you know about the truth-sayer drug?" "You take it to improve your ability to detect falsehood," he said. "My mother's told me." "Have you ever seen truth trance?" He shook his head. "No." "The drug's dangerous," he said, "but it gives insight. When a truth-sayer is gifted by the drug, she can look down. She can look many places in her memory, in her body's memory. We look down so many avenues of the past, but only feminine avenues." Her voice took on a note of sadness. "Yet there's a place where no truth-sayer can see. We are repelled by it, terrorized. It is said a man will come one day and find in the gift of the drug his inward eye. He will look where we cannot, into both feminine and masculine pasts." "Your Kuzak Haderach?" "Yes, the one who can be many places at once. The Kuzak Haderach. Many men have tried the drug, so many, but none has succeeded." "They tried and failed, all of them?" "Oh no," she shook her head. "They tried and died." And it's another chapter. Oh, that's another chapter, kind of, but not really. Because the chapters are Book 1, Dune 1, Book 2, Muad'Dib 325, Book 3, the spoilers, The Prophet 589, and then there's some appendices, and then a map. And then an afterword by his son, Brian Herbert, who wrote a bunch of books that people don't seem to like if they really like Frank Herbert. So thanks for listening to me read Dune. Probably.